The music's on, the disco ball has dropped, and it's time to get this party started. You're listening to episode 8 of DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery After Party podcast here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. I'm your host, Heather Barker, and with me at the turntable is my co-host, Jeff Hewlett. How are you doing tonight, Jeff?
I'm doing great, Heather. How about you?
Doing pretty well. Kind of sad to have us come to the mid-season finale of Discovery. But thankfully, we don't have too long to wait until it's back. January 7th, it got moved up a week. So we'll go eat some turkey here in the U.S. and decorate a Christmas tree, light the menorah, and then we'll be good to go.
Yeah,
I guess.
we survive our New Year's parties.
Assuming the world doesn't end.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah, well.
For those who aren't familiar with DiscoTrek, we're a community-based Star Trek podcast focusing on each episode of Star Trek Discovery as they air. Tonight we'll be discussing episode 9, the mid-season finale, Into the Forest I Go. With us to talk about the episode are two members of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas Convention Group, which is the way to gain admission onto the show. Our first guest is one of our great friends from STLV. I guess both of our guests are great friends from STLV. But Eric and his wife Annie hung out with us and I believe won one of the bingo contests. So Eric Muirhead, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jeff and Heather. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you. It's always fun to see our friends pop up as winners. So our next guest is another great friend, as I said. Her name is Sarah Gulde. Sarah, we went to the Gaze in Space party together and ran into each other in the hallways quite a bit at STLV. It's so nice to hear your voice again. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, we're going to hop into our discussion of episode 9 in just a moment, but first we have some business to do. As we mentioned, DiscoTrek grew out of our love for the Star Trek fan base, and we wanted to give fans a way to talk about Discovery. We will be returning next year. You won't see us for a while, but when you do, make sure to join the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas Convention Group on Facebook. Once you do that, you'll see a new post every Tuesday with the DiscoTrek image and information about the following week's recording time. Comment there to be entered, and we'll use a random generator the following Saturday to pick 2 winners. Once you've been on the podcast, you can't come back on again, but there are other ways to be involved. Jeff, do you want to let people know how to do that?
Sure thing. So the Sunday before the episode airs, there'll be a post in the group about the episode itself, and you can comment on that thread, and there will be a chance for your comment to be read on the show the next evening. Or if you'd prefer, you can leave it up to a 2-minute voicemail on our voicemail line at 609-512-LLAP. That's 609-512-5527 for your chance for your voice to get featured on the show.
And we hope that everyone does that. We love seeing our friends' feedback about the episodes. So I think we have yet another new patron on our Patreon account. Am I right about that?
You are absolutely right, and he was a DiscoTrek guest not long ago, Mr. Tommy Burkhalter. Thank you so much for becoming a Patreon supporter of the Tricorder Transmissions and DiscoTrek. We absolutely love that you're there with us and you're part of our family. Thank you to you and, of course, to all of our other Patreon supporters. Thanks to all of you. And if you are looking for a way to become a Patreon supporter, it's pretty easy to do. You can go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/thetricordertransmissions, or you can visit our website, thetricordertransmissions.com. Click on the orange Patreon link on the right-hand side, and you'll jump right over to the page. So if you enjoy what we do here on DiscoTrek or any of the other Tricorder Transmission shows, please consider becoming a patron, because you will get instant access to our unedited episodes as soon as we're done recording them. So, for example, this episode will be up for our patrons tonight, right after we're finished recording, a day before anyone else gets a chance to hear it. And our short-lived episodes usually air on our Patreon page a week or 2 before you're able to get them in our normal feed. So a lot of benefits there for patrons.
Yeah, especially getting to hear me mess up and say, please edit that out, Jeff. All right. So now that we've got all that out of the way, I just wanted to remind everybody the show is cut into 3 segments. Drop the Record, where we have our opening remarks and reactions to the episode. Play a New Track, which is where we explore what we learned that's new about the Star Trek universe. And Spin It Again is our look back at standout moments, scenes, characters, just about anything you feel is worth a second glance. All right. So before we jump in, Black alert, everybody. From here on out, there will be spoilers. There will be show spoilers. There will be fan theory spoilers. This episode of Star Trek was pretty heavy. It dealt with some issues involving PTSD and sexual assault. And so we would like to make sure that everyone did watch the episode, is aware of that, and is aware that we will be discussing those subjects tonight. So if it's something that might be a little heavy for you, please keep that in mind. You may want to bow out for this discussion. All right, let's go ahead and drop the record. Let's give our initial reactions to the episode. Sarah, why don't you start us off?
This episode was so dense. Like, there was so much that went on. It's hard to go to any one thing, but the plot advanced a lot. I think there was a lot of character development. It was intense.
It was. I kind of feel like Discovery overall is just very intense. I remember talking about it from day one and saying it's not your mama's Star Trek, and also mentioning like how I kind of enjoy now that the Orville is on, because it's just a different kind of sci-fi show, and a little light. And this is just, I mean, I love Discovery, guys. I won't get into that big war here on the podcast. I'm Team Discovery, but I do like the Orville as well. Regardless, Discovery has been pretty heavy overall, and I think there's some valid discussion there that we might talk about a little bit later. Was there any like one moment that won't ruin your Spin It Again combinations, but that you might point out?
I mean, the kiss. That was huge, and at the same time, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's been an interesting day, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. That scene for me was certainly a standout for this episode, and a true highlight. Eric, what about you? What is your first reaction to this episode?
My first reaction to the episode, a lot like Sarah was, there is just so much going on tonight. I listened to the episode from last week, and I actually wasn't a big fan of last week's episode. It kind of just left me really confused, especially with where Saru sat and kind of the revelations we had about him. But I really loved how they kind of tied things up and left us wanting more at the mid-season finale. But the biggest thing is, I can't believe we lost Cole already.
I know. And man, I feel like this episode was the one episode where we really got to see what Cole and Kenneth Mitchell could do. And boo, like, I'm hoping that like somehow that ship blew up and he's still alive, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. But good point about, last week's episode, a lot of people struggled with the episode. With my Twitter polls that I do, it's coming in at the bottom. And I feel really bad for that, because it was Kirsten Byers, the first time that she wrote an episode, and so many people were very, very excited. And I think that overall it was done really well, but for me left some questions. And from this episode, I realized everything with Saru just kind of got looked over. Like, we didn't really do anything with the Pavins in this episode, aside from Saru saying, oh, well, perhaps if I'm an ambassador type role, and explaining, to Starfleet what's going on, but no real penalty for Saru's action on the planet or last episode. So I thought that was interesting. Jeff, what about you? What did you think about this episode?
Well, I think this is maybe the fourth or fifth show in a row that I've said the same thing, that Discovery keeps surprising me. Like everyone else said, they packed so much into a mid-season finale and then gave us a cliffhanger that I totally didn't expect. I mean, going in, I kind of thought it was going to be exactly where the previous episodes had led. You were going to wind up with, Burnham getting captured by the Klingons, because you saw that in the trailer, and maybe the Klingons having the upper hand in the war, leaving some tension for the cliffhanger. And, something potentially bad happening to the Pavins and their planet, but it's not at all what they gave us. So I was like, wow, I did not expect them to succeed in destroying the Death Ship at all. That really threw me for a loop. I thought the mission was going to fail or something was going to go wrong, but totally shocked me. And there's plenty of other I'm sure we're going to get to every single one of these moments, so I'm not going to run every single one of them down, but I just think we've had some incredible moments throughout the show, both emotional and action moments. I mean, the Stamets and Culver "I love you" exchange with the the romantic gesture of planning the La Boheme when they return home. It was absolutely amazing stuff. Lorca, finally having a soft spot and recognizing Stamets' heroism near the end was amazing. What a weird turnaround for him. I didn't see that coming at all. And I love that Saru's still pleading the case for the Pavins, even though Starfleet wrote them off. We're going to get a little more into that. I have something to say about that later too. So, I mean, this episode was just nonstop action and emotion for me. I think it hit so many right notes and gives us a lot to think about over the next couple months while we're waiting for Discovery to come back.
Yeah, well, I don't mind, since we usually spend a little bit of this segment of the show talking about the things you brought up. I think we can go ahead and jump into some of those before we move into Play a New Track and what we've learned that's new. So let's go back to Saru, because the last episode was kind of pushed as a Saru episode. Yep. And we left with him in this very vulnerable state. And like I said, we're on the bridge, and Saru doesn't have a very big role in this episode at all, really. So what do you guys think? Like, did you expect him to have any penalty for what he did? Were you surprised that he came back and just kind of what was your thought you wanted to share, Jeff?
Well, I was a little bit surprised that they didn't at least resolve it. I mean, they kind of left it hanging out there, like you said, what was going to be the repercussions for his actions on the planet. But I guess they may have just glossed over that and left it. But what I thought was interesting is that we see that he still does have an affinity for the Pavins. And I guess that the part that really stood out to me is that the Starfleet command of this time feels a little bit more harsh, because they were totally cool with letting the Pavins die to the Klingons. And just to save Discovery, it's like, well, Discovery's important. You're our number one asset in the war. We don't care about that entire planet's worth of beings. I thought that was a really strange move for Starfleet, and maybe not something we've seen in future series. I mean, future time series. We wouldn't have seen that in TNG. We wouldn't have seen that Starfleet would have done everything they could to bend over backwards to help the Plavins. But, then we see Lorca sticking his neck out for them and disobeying orders, which seemed to be contrary to, what we would have expected from him. But then again, you could spin that as he just really wanted a crack at that Klingon ship.
Yeah, for sure. Sarah, did you have any thoughts about Saru?
Yeah, I'm thinking that what we didn't see was Burnham deciding to cover for him. I couldn't see her ratting him out after everything they've been through.
Yeah.
Wonder if Tyler bailed him out too, because he would have had to keep quiet about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. So that's definitely interesting. Eric, did you have any thoughts there?
I really agree with Sarah. When you think about it, the only people who really knew what went on were Saru, Burnham, and Tyler. And Burnham doesn't want to hurt Saru any more than she already has. And Tyler is the cool guy. He's the new guy. He doesn't want to rock the boat. So I would think that in their report, they would just kind of gloss it over and be like, we had some issues, but we worked through them. It wasn't that big of a deal, just to protect him.
Yeah, I like this theory. It's we don't have anything else. We didn't see what happened, so we are kind of left to develop our own headcanon here. I think it makes sense to me. Like I said, we saw Saru on the bridge, and he was sciencing and helping Burnham and Tyler develop the way to hop onto the ship with the little beacons or whatever. And then we don't really see much from him until the end, when Burnham and Tyler come back, and Burnham and Saru exchange this glance on the bridge, which it's that moment is directed in a way that it stands out because there's an obvious kind of a resolution there. Like Saru respects what Burnham has done. And I was kind of waiting for Burnham to give Saru Georgiou's Delta.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just kept waiting because I kind of thought, oh, that would be a really nice, resolution to their whole arc across this mid-season.
Yeah.
But we didn't quite see that. So
he already got the telescope. He got enough swag.
That's true. I'm really curious to see what happens with Saru next season. I really hope that we learn a little bit more because despite the last episode being about Saru, I don't feel like we really learned much about him except that when he does not experience fear, he certainly is in control. Like when you're in a constant state of fear, or let's compare it with anxiety, that's something that controls you. And so for this first time, Saru was free of that. And when you're free of not having control, you feel some control, and then with control comes this power. And that's kind of what I took from that episode and what happened with him. But I still want to know more about him, like, and Kelpians, and who the predators are, and how he got into Starfleet. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm really hoping to find that out. If not this next half of the season, but definitely season 2.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice to get into a little more backstory. I don't feel like they have a lot of time to delve into that as deeply as we would like them to right now with all the story that they have to tell. It feels like they need to pack so much into these episodes to get these, to get everything in there. And I think once we get through this, I think we're better. We probably will see that maybe something like the second season, as you predicted. I think they'll have a little more room to breathe once we get through the Klingon War.
I hope so.
Yeah.
There's so many people on the bridge that I want to know more about, and they've done a great job so far of including them just through shots where they're giving each other looks on the bridge. Mm-hmm. So with almost no dialogue, it's like this is the family.
Yeah. And like a lot of people don't know their names. I mean, I know their names because I make it my job. Like I do a podcast, so I want to sound intelligent when I talk about them. But a lot of people just still, despite the fact that their names have been said on the show, most of them, people still don't know who they are. And so I think that, that Lower Decks type episode or something. And actually, I think it was Ted Carterhole posted on Twitter today or yesterday a photo with the actress who plays Olusegun and said that we will see more of her next season. And I hope that means like more character development for sure, because they did such a good job of bringing such a diverse cast together for the bridge crew that all are kind of like, oh, I want to know more about her. I want to know more about him. So, and I know Ariam is getting a lot of attention. She's the augmented human.
Is she the helmsman from the Shenzhou? Because we were talking about that earlier.
No, she's different. If you read Desperate Hours, that character, Lieutenant Jira Nirwani, and she, as far as I know, blew up with the Shenzhou. But she's in that book. She has a very minor role. She's a junior tactical officer. And the thing on her head is basically a futuristic Oculus Rift, creating a virtual environment that allows her, through the magic of science fiction, to more effectively perform her duties. Detmer was on the bridge on the Shenzhou. She did not have the cybernetic implant on the side of her head. And I think now she also has a cybernetic eye because her left eye is a different color than her right eye. I think she has a blue eye and a brown eye. But she was there, and then Ariam is a different character. So I was kind of sad that that's all that we got to see of Jira Nirwani, since everybody was like, "What? Like, who is that?" So that's kind of a bummer. But we have Ariam to replace her, so I definitely do want to know more about them. I think that for me, part of this. Like at one hand, I really enjoy this 15 episode story arc where it's all one big thing. And it's something that you can watch week to week like we are, or you can sit down and binge in a day, which I will be doing over the break like 2 or 3 times. But the way in which Discovery is very different from the Star Trek that we know is that we've had so many more episodes. And I just like reminder to myself and everyone that this is only 9 episodes into Discovery, right? So we cannot compare 9 episodes of Discovery to 7 seasons of The Next Generation. We really need to compare these episodes to the first 9 of the other series.
We're on the Code of Honor phase.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that Discovery has really exceeded most of the other series as far as its first 9 episodes. I think I've seen some mention of DS9 and how strong those episodes were. But again, that's all a matter of opinion. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I'm missing is just that deep dive and that deep development for the characters, as well as some of the issues that they brought up. And so there's things that I like about the 15 episode arc. I'm glad that they're going to end the Klingon War at the end of this season, and then next season will be something different. I'm really curious to see what they're going to do with that second season.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to be another season-long story arc, or they're going to go more towards an episodic format, or maybe smaller arcs like the other shows did later on. I'm not sure, but it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and hop into the next segment. I mean, there's still so much to talk about, but let's move it along and we can wander off track if we need to. So let's move into Plan New Track, where we discuss what we learned new about this episode, new about the Star Trek universe. Eric, is there anything that you learned new in this episode?
Yeah, I was really intrigued, kind of going back to what Jeff was saying, that Starfleet seems to be evolving. It used to be that all you needed to do to disobey an order was pretend that your subspace transmitter didn't work and send like a fake static message back to Starfleet Command, like, we can't hear you. But now they have to, like, when Lorca says there has to be a paper trail. We have to go down to sickbay and have all these tests done so we can report back up to Starfleet Command. And it just seems to be more of a realistic organization in that sense. It's not just this kind of thing that Uhura makes a phone call to. It actually is involving itself with the plot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting, like, when we saw the court martial for Burnham and everyone was like in the shadows, and that kind of it made Starfleet feel very, very sinister then. So it's definitely a different Starfleet that we know. But yeah, I keep coming back to that point Jeff made about that, they don't care about this planet of peaceful beings. They don't care about what happens to it.
Yeah, it seems very different from the Starfleet we've come to know in other shows. Even Enterprise, they seemed a lot more caring about other races than they do about the Pavans. But then again, we have I guess in a time of war, that could explain the difference in behavior and, the fact that Discovery is one of a kind still at this point. And essentially, we know that it is really the only thing that's keeping them ahead of the Klingons in the war. So I guess that consideration. And of course, it was a Vulcan delivering that news. So, of course, they invoked logic in that as well. So,
was anyone surprised that Lorca did not obey the orders? Or did you expect that he wouldn't?
No, I have a theory about that, which we can get into later.
Yeah, I have another theory too. Oh, it might be the same as Eric's.
Well, we can do theories, but Sarah, what did you want to say?
I mean, it just wasn't a surprise that he'd rather stay in battle than go home.
Yeah.
This is all he has. This is his entire life. His entire identity is wrapped up in this ship and what it can do.
Yeah. And, to Jeff's point that he made earlier, this Lorca seems a little different. The first time that I watched this, I was like, okay, we've seen him evolve over these first 9 episodes where in the beginning I was kind of like, oh, like he's a bad guy. Maybe it's hard to tell. And I think in some respect he is still uncategorizable, which I will credit to our friend Marina Kravchuk, who wrote that in her little review. Like, you can't stick Lorca into any one category, but he certainly seemed less shady Lorca and more part of the team in this episode, I guess, and a leader. You know, he gave his speech where he said that when he found them, they were, oh, what is the quote about that they were scientists? They were a crew of polite scientists that had evolved into fierce warriors all. I don't know. Like, aside from the one part where Stamets was in the drive and Culber was like, you know, we have to pull him out, and Lorca pretty much said no. You know, he was making him do the jumps regardless of what happened and to keep him alive. I mean, that was very Lorca to me. I don't know. Jeff, what were your thoughts about Lorca?
Yeah, well, again, he's still that enigma. I mean, you get different conflicting things in the episode as we've gotten in other episodes that make you think, oh, he's not so bad, and oh, wait a minute, yes, he is. So I almost want to say that he's doing what suits him, because you see him. You know, at one point in the episode that stood out to me with Lorca was when he kind of, I don't want to say manipulated, but basically manipulated Stamets into doing the 133 jumps in the first place. You know, by calling on the explorer in him and, you know, pretty much railroading him into doing it by, you know, playing up to the things that he knew would work. So I still get the feeling that that's really the Lorca that is the true Lorca or the closest to the true Lorca. But, you know, I hate to say that all of the quote unquote good things he's doing are not necessarily for the good of everyone and just the good of himself. But there are some arguments to be made, and we could probably talk about this for the rest of the episode.
Well, and he certainly didn't seem too happy to hear that Cornwell was alive and making a full recovery. So I'm sure that we will revisit her threat to him to take away his ship at the end of the day. Eric, you said you had a bit of a theory.
So the entire time that we've seen Lorca, he has one constant, and that is he does not want to be separated from Discovery. Yep. Discovery is his world. It's what he wants. And what is unique about Discovery? That spore drive. And the conversation he had with Stamets when he was playing up Stamets as an explorer and saying, if we just get a few more jumps, we can find this whole new universe that we have never seen before. Mm-hmm. I think Lorca this entire time has known about the mirror universe, and the reason that he pushed for those 133 jumps was that's what he needed to get back to the mirror universe, or to get to the mirror universe. And if you look, I went back and I rewatched the episode. Right before the last jump, he changed the guidance system with the command override Lorca G. Mm. And that is what resulted in them jumping into whatever alternate reality or universe they ended the episode in. I think.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you or cut you off. I just, I just glossed right over that and just assumed he was just putting in his code of approval after the spore jump. Like that was just his code that he puts in.
Yeah, I had the same theory for the end of that episode that I'm not sure. I don't want to think that he purposely overloaded Stamets and hurt him on purpose, but I had the feeling that once he realized that Cornwell was back, that he had to do something to not make it back to Starfleet.
Well, and that would also kind of play into having him do the full medical workup on Stamets just to make sure that he was healthy enough, we'll say. Which I still don't really understand, aside from the very basic fact that the spore drive jumps are harming Stamets and affecting his brain and changing his brain. I didn't quite get exactly what that meant. Like what the increased white matter meant.
I think it's like red matter. It doesn't actually make sense, so don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Because I was like, like, where's the science here? Okay. So that would kind of, that would make sense to me. And then him manipulating Stamets to do everything and kind of playing into, oh, you don't have to do that one more jump, knowing that Stamets probably would. Can I just say that I'm really glad that Stamets didn't die?
Me too.
Because instead he turned into the Kwisatz Haderach.
Yeah. Gary Mitchell.
Yeah.
I will come out and say this now, and I'm sorry, Star Trek, but like if they had killed off Stamets, I don't think I could keep watching Star Trek Discovery. You can't give us, and it's a big part of it is, yes, he is, one of the first main, gay characters on Star Trek, or really the first gay man in a relationship on Star Trek. But I think like even above Burnham, I love Stamets the most. I feel like Stamets has played such a core part, aside from being the spore jumper, or the tool for that. I think he's just played such a crucial part in these 9 episodes, and that of all the characters, for me, he's the one that's been developed the most. So to lose him would have devastated me on multiple levels, and I don't know that I could have continued to watch it if they had killed him off. So I'm very glad. Very glad that they didn't. It's interesting because I think a lot of people really enjoyed the Lorca Stamets relationship in this episode, and saw it in a very positive light and not as one of Lorca manipulating him.
I just feel that Lorca's got a game, just like Laurel. He's in it for himself, and he's got a game. And you're telling me your family owns a fortune cookie factory, and you don't know how to eat a fortune cookie? He smashes them on his desk. Like, that's weird. That's weird. That's a red flag.
What really struck me about him in this episode was the scene where Tyler requests that Burnham go to the Klingon ship with him, and Lorca says no, and then Burnham gives a convincing argument, and he changes his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of question out there. Why, what is Lorca's thing with Burnham? Why is he so protective of Burnham? I think that they actually showed that scene in last week's After Trek, like that was the bonus scene. And I know that even after that, people were asking that question, and we don't know. And some of this drives me crazy. Like there are so many loose threads right now.
Could it possibly be that he knows that even if something goes wrong with the spore drive, he's still got a trump card in his pocket by having the killer of Takuvma aboard his ship as a bargaining chip?
It's possible, and she's the one who figured out how the spore drive worked. Mm-hmm. So she's the one besides Stamets who knows the most about it.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like there's something more than that, but I guess we'll find out. Sarah, did you learn anything new about Star Trek universe in this episode?
Yes, I learned that in those days you had to carry your translator with you, and I'm so glad she did, and that the Klingons started speaking English, which they speak so much faster than Klingon. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think probably many fans were happy to have a reprieve. I love listening to the Klingon language. I'm a big fan of it. But I certainly understand there's some difficulty, as I've expressed before, with reading it at the speed which it's up there. I love listening to it. It's just sometimes hard for me to read it all when it's up there and whatnot. So that was pretty cool. I absolutely loved that moment and having that technology present and hearing Burnham. I assume it was her, it was actually Sonequa Martin Green doing the Klingon. I don't know for sure, but you could hear the translation of like her tone of voice doing it. So I wondered if she did it herself or not, or maybe I'm just wrong. But that was pretty cool, man. I'm like thinking about that whole scene between Burnham and Cole. Like I was not expecting it. I think, Jeff, you said you thought that she was just going to be taken prisoner, and then I guess fighting against Cole that way.
Well, I think, yeah, based on what we saw, we usually don't talk about the teasers at the end of the episodes very much, but that was something that made me think, and it was a brilliantly made teaser because it obviously misdirected me into thinking something that didn't actually happen. But I thought that whole moment, that whole sequence where, she's thinking quickly about how to stop the Klingon ship from going into warp before they can complete their mission, and decides to take a humongous risk and expose herself to the Klingons and stall them even further by risking her life to fight Cole one-on-one until hopefully Discovery can complete their jump sequence and beam them all out of the Klingon ship, which obviously it happens at the very last possible minute. But I thought that was a pretty impressive display, again, of Burnham's character and what she's willing to do, to protect her crew and her mission. I think it was an incredible move, and I thought it was. I couldn't say enough good things about it. That this is like the second episode in a row where she just completely sticks her neck out on the line, and got that whole I've got nothing to lose sort of attitude. So I'm wondering if all of this is going to be enough to commute her death sentence once they actually get back to Starfleet and find out all the things that she did.
Yeah, I have a feeling that's never going to happen.
Oh, you think they're going to just throw her right back in jail at the end of the
No, I
season?
don't think that she's ever going to go back to prison.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would hope not.
So what about you, Eric? Did you have any thoughts about the Burnham and Cole scene?
That has been my favorite scene in all of Discovery for a couple of reasons. So I don't know if anyone was at the convention for the Discovery panel that's listening out there, but I am the Klingon tattoo guy, and I asked Mary Shifo and Kenneth Mitchell, who were on the panel, and they were spectacular. Specifically, what are you guys doing to make sure we don't lose the Klingons we love? And that scene, more than any other, has given me faith, and I'm so happy with the way Discovery did it, because it'd been so easy for Cole to just pull out a disruptor and shoot her. But instead, he pulls out a mek'leth, throws it at her feet, and says, "Let's do this." And that shows that a lot of the Klingon ethos that we in the rest of the Prime universe really love is still there. And I thought that was just a spectacular scene. And just to tag on to what Sarah was saying, the Klingon language in this show has been incredible, absolutely incredible. And if you listen, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but if you speak enough Klingon that you can actually understand the words that they're saying, the writing is really great, and I cannot say enough for the actors to be in that amount of makeup and still be able to convey the emotion in a language that they have probably no idea what they're saying. I'm willing to forgive the fact that it's a little slow, because they're just doing a great job.
Yeah, I don't mind that it's slow. I mean, I do pay a little bit more attention to that now, since other people have brought up that complaint, and listening to them. But it doesn't distract to me, because it's something that's so different, and that I think brings so much to the Klingons just as a race. I can overlook those things pretty easily because of how magnificent it's really been done. And I definitely felt that Cole was like the most Klingon of the Klingons, as far as what we know and what we've seen. And yeah, I said it earlier, but I just feel like I wish we had gotten more of Kenneth Mitchell as Cole, because I kind of feel like now we've been robbed.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was just such an incredible performance, and he is a Klingon I never want to run into. Yeah, oh man. Sarah, did you have any thoughts to add about Burnham and Cole?
Oh, I thought the scene was just beautiful. I'm so sad the Ship of the Dead is gone, because it was gorgeous.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of like David Lynch's Dune, those sets.
Yeah.
And just how ornate and Baroque it was. And I loved the shot of Burnham leaping and transporting mid-leap.
Yeah.
That was great.
The fight was choreographed so wonderfully. I loved everything about it.
This episode overall was just really beautiful. There were some incredible shots. I think the one where Stamets and Lorca are looking out over I took a screenshot of it, but like that star, I guess, sun type star. I can't remember where they are in that scene. They're on this ship above Pavo, and then I think it's at the end where they're walking back. Like they stop and talk, and there's kind of a sun star in front of it. And then it's like a dock. Just a beautiful scene. And then like when Laurel is after she's, captured and she's in the cell and she's talking to Tyler, like the lighting and that shot just played off her makeup incredibly well. And just like Cole on the ship, like his makeup looked incredible with the lighting. Like it was such a beautiful episode. Like I thought last week's episode was really pretty, but this week's episode was gorgeous. And I think I tweeted something last night like, this is what my $10 a month gets me? Like I'll pay more. Like please take my money, because this is nothing that we would have gotten on regular cable TV. So I will continue to pay my $10. I will pay $15 for this quality of production.
I'm just kidding. I was shushing his joke, but yeah, I agree. I agree. I bought the tier with the commercials in it, so I'm only paying the lower tier. But I agree. The production quality of these shows is unprecedented. I just think it stacks up so well against some of the other super high budget shows that are out there now, and surpasses some of them too. So. If anybody, well, I highly doubt anybody who's listening to this podcast isn't already subscribed, but if you're not, it's definitely worth the money.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Jeff, what did you learn new about the Star Trek universe?
Well, we already talked a little bit about, you brought up what the spore drive is doing to Stamets. We get some empirical evidence that it is having a negative effect on him, but it also gives us a little bit of something to think about what it could have been doing to the tardigrade as well. I know the creature's gone now and it's okay, but it was unable to communicate and tell us what was wrong, but it's possible that the spore drive could have been doing the same thing to the tardigrade's brain that it was doing to Stamets. So just something to think about, when you go back and do the rewatch and feel bad for the poor tardigrade again, because you will. We all will when we watch that again. But I like that Lorca's been keeping all that data on all the jumps. We've seen him playing with those star charts a couple times, but it really wasn't explained exactly what he was doing with them. So
well, that's another cool tie-in. Sorry, that's another cool tie-in then to Eric's theory and your theory. That he's been mapping it out, figuring stuff out all along.
Exactly. And it also plays into the theory that he's got the reason why he's so attached to Discovery and will do anything to hold on to Discovery, even abandoning Cornwell to die at the hands of the Klingons, because he's got some sort of ulterior motives going on with all this data. There's some alternate plan, I think, that we're going to find out eventually with all this thing. But I thought it was fascinating that he had all of that data and, he used it as kind of a key to get Stamets to do what he wanted him to do, especially by showing him the potential for parallel universes. So that's interesting. And I guess the other thing was that we didn't touch on is those pattern simulators. I thought those were interesting devices that they used to mask their human life signs while they were on the Klingon ship. Kind of almost look like Iron Man chest implants, right? The Tony Stark chest implant. But that was pretty cool technology as well. Something that we definitely didn't see in that sort of time period in TOS and Enterprise. So that was kind of cool. I like that a lot. And Starfleet apparently has some cool spy gear in their arsenal.
I'd like to know why those little data collector things, which I forget what they're specifically called, but why did they have to have noise?
That's what I was going to say.
Like,
I mean, why does it have to say establishing connection with Discovery? I mean, and they didn't hear that on the bridge when she's sitting in front of all the Klingons with that.
Yeah. Thing? I mean, at least the first time they're in a cargo bay type thing, but the second time she's right there with everyone around, and you wouldn't hear that. That just seemed kind of odd.
Yeah. And they have the Starfleet Delta that says Starfleet Command on of the thing. Like, I just pictured some like Klingon janitor like cleaning the cargo bay and being like, "What's this thing?"
Yeah,
it's Starfleet on.
Or they all go to bed for the night and they turn the lights off on the bridge and they just see the blue light emanating from that device. Like, what the heck is that thing?
Like, at least put a box over it or something.
I know, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can turn down the volume on my Alexa, or my Echo. So like I just at least turn down the volume so that not everyone can hear them or something. Nitpicky, I know, but
no, it definitely stood out to me though as something that was kind of an oversight, but
it was definitely a Galaxy Quest moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think we've kind of talked about anything I was going to bring up. I'm trying to rack my brain really quickly to think if there was anything else. I was really shocked that Discovery can actually do jumps that quickly, can do those mini jumps.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from the toll that it took on Stamets, and it was a little unbelievable to me that Stamets could physically do that. I know that they're mini jumps, but it just seems like that many jumps on a brain with his brain already suffering damage would have definitely killed him, and probably far before 133.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say that was a really cool sequence. Watching the ship do all those little jumps, that was really, really cool to see.
Heather, speaking of the speed of the jumps, something that just occurred to me is that I wonder how many jumps they can do off of each pod of spores that they load into the drive. And is poor Tilly having to rapid fire load those canisters of spores for every single jump? If it's like one jump per canister, you see her pulling them out of the wall and loading them into the thing and pressing a button and pulling it out of the wall, loading. So were there 133 of those pods, or are they?
No, I don't think so.
It's not like the plutonium from the DeLorean where it's one stick for one time travel. And
yeah, well, again, like this is where I feel like we could have a little bit more depth there.
Yeah.
I feel that a lot of people are having difficulty believing the spore drive and getting on board with the spore drive because we really know so little about how it works. And there are a lot of people out there that don't believe it's actually something that could ever work. So I wish that that some of these questions were answered, because I think that would help people connect with it a bit more, but we'll see. So I think we've got quite a few standout moments in this episode. So let's pop into Spin It Again, where we revisit them. Sarah, you already mentioned one, so feel free to bring it up again. Do we want to go ahead and talk about Stamets and Culber?
Yeah, I just love how everything in that episode just flowed naturally out of and what any relationship would look like. They say, I love you too. They kiss because something scary is about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a huge thing that has never happened on the show before, but it was just completely natural.
It was. I smiled every time, like my heart. I've been waiting for that kiss. Like, I don't remember when I tweeted to Anthony Rapp and Wilson Cruz, like, or I think it was for an after trek. I was like, when is the kiss coming? Like, I just really want to see the kiss. Their relationship, Stamets and Culber, is the most believable relationship on Discovery for me. I find it much more natural and emotional for me than like Tyler and Burnham. So I adore them, and I love the way it was done. And I never once felt that this moment was going to be done in poor taste. Like it wasn't going to be some weird, well, here's the gay characters moment, because that's not what Star Trek would ever do. I get really frustrated by the people who have said that before. It was a moment that I have been waiting for, and it was done so tastefully, so naturally, and evoked so much emotion from me. Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp have such good chemistry together, and I was really, really happy to see that moment. I tweeted about it. I was like, that was pretty much my favorite thing from this episode was their interactions. That tweet got retweeted a lot, and unfortunately, there were a lot of homophobic comments that were made that I woke up to this morning. And I'll talk about that in an upcoming episode that we're doing about Discovery, Star Trek versus social media, I think is what we're going to call it. But I remind myself today that for every one comment that was homophobic or just hateful, there were at least 20 other comments in support of what happened. So I just hold on to that. I think that the general reaction overall was a very positive one. What do the guys think? Eric, did you have any thoughts about that moment?
I did, and I thought it was a long time coming, because that's what I thought when they said that they were going to have a homosexual couple on Star Trek. I thought that's what they were talking about. And that scene and the scene where they're brushing their teeth together, I think are the most heartfelt moments, because that's where we see that they have a normal relationship, just like maybe even more normal than other people on the ship. And I think that's what Star Trek really makes a name for itself doing, is just saying that it's not different, it's not crazy, it's just another way of normal.
Yeah, it's like we're just people. Like we're all people here, and just because we love someone of the same sex doesn't make it any different than any other relationship. Jeff, what about you?
Since we saw Stamets going back to what we originally knew of him in the earlier episodes, I thought it was especially poignant for him to, turn back and say, I love you. It gave him a much more emotional dimension to a character that felt very standoffish when we first met him, and he was kind of going back that way. So I thought that gave a really nice, it was a great moment, a great humanizing moment for his character going into a situation that may very well kill him. He wanted it to be known how much he cared, and it's something that a lot of us would want in our own lives. That love between yourself and another human being is a wonderful thing. And I think that it was a great moment for it. I think it was just well acted. It was very poignant. I was choked up when I saw it, because, when you see someone that you, especially because Culber was, almost begging him not to do it. Any of us going into a situation like that would want to express, how much we cared about that person, that we may not see again after that. So it was a wonderful thing. And it was just what roller coaster of action and emotion in this episode that kept going up and down and up and down. And I loved it. I thought it was wonderful.
I think that Wilson Cruz compliments Anthony Rapp so well. Like these two men together, they're adorable, as a couple on Star Trek Discovery, and they're adorable as friends on After Trek. Like Wilson Cruz totally won me over the other week when they were on together. But I think you make a good point, Jeff. And it's not just with Stamets being persnickety, as Tilly likes to say, but even with what we've seen of their relationship, they're not like this lovey-dovey.
Right.
They're not like that. Like Stamets is persnickety, and Culber is kind of, he deals with it. He's like, yeah, I love you for who you are, type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like, though we haven't seen a lot of them together, we saw them in Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad, where he, Culber was apologizing for his partner's behavior, mm-hmm. and whatnot. We saw them there, but this is where we're really seeing how they truly feel. Although I did get that from when Stamets was telling Burnham the story of how they met, and you could really feel the endearment there. But them acting together, I don't know. It's just a very special dynamic for me, and I think that the way it was done was it just exceeded my expectations. I could probably talk about it for another 30 minutes. Because it was great. And I love seeing the depth of their feelings together. I loved Stamets coming over and saying, when this is done, I'm going to have all the time in the world, and then making the La Boheme reference, yep. Which anyone who's followed Anthony Rapp or seen Rent and knows, they get it. So, and if you haven't, you should just go see it, go or watch. Did they reference it in the movie too? The movie version's the same, right? Does anyone know the movie version of Rent versus
I haven't watched it in a long time.
Yeah, okay.
I was saying, my wife was saying that Rent is Mirror Universe La Boheme, so it's kind of appropriate for the episode.
I love it. Yeah, it's just their relationship is so real and so endearing, and just thank you. I said it in my tweet, but I just thank you, Star Trek. Thank you to everyone who made that moment happen, because it is meaningful to a lot of people. And if I say any more, I'm going to cry. So
wait, can I say two more things on this?
Yes.
So first of all, I thought it was a really powerful statement about, two people who are marginalized in our time. Mm-hmm. The world we live in isn't what it has to look like. We should just be able to be just like anybody else. And mm-hmm. I love the show for making this statement that this is what this is what things are going to be when we get everything together. And the other thing is that makes me so happy every time I see Wilson Cruz on screen, because I just feel like Ricky made it out of his teenage years alive, and he grew up and he's a hot doctor and he has a great relationship and everything's going to be okay.
I like that. Totally on board with it. Totally on board. And
in my headcanon, his name is Dr. Ricky.
Dr. Ricky.
I call Lorca Captain Malfoy, so it's fine.
Yeah, I like it. I think it works. Absolutely. All right, Sarah, did you have any other standout moments you wanted to mention?
I mean, Tyler's breakdown.
All right.
That was really powerful.
Is that anybody else's mentioned, by the way, Eric?
That was a really powerful moment for me. And I thought it was, I have some issues with that scene, but Sarah, you go ahead. I'll talk about them later. It was just the way PTSD is for veterans is a big issue right now, and I appreciate how Discovery is going out of their way to talk more about veterans issues than other Star Trek has. We haven't seen an episode like this really since DS9, and Siege of AR 558 is incredible. It's Only a Paper Moon is incredible, but I really didn't appreciate when Tyler was having his issues on the Ship of the Dead, and Admiral Cornwall is like, I've seen this, knowing him for 10 seconds, says, I've seen this before. He's having PTSD. He's going to be no good to us until we snap him out of it. Like, it just seemed it kind of seemed a little incredulous to me. And because I know a lot of people afflicted with PTSD. I know a lot of people who are suffering through it. And most of them, honestly, don't want to be seen differently. They don't want to think that people to think they're broken. They don't want people to think that they can't be good anymore. And it's just kind of it was kind of a throwaway moment. And I thought that there was a better way they could have handled that. I appreciate that they're going through it with him, but it could have been better.
Other thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't know. I found it a little bit disturbing, especially the flashback scenes, and I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more of some of those in particular. But I remember feeling a little bit confused at first whether it was PTSD or some sort of trigger mechanism when he sees L'Rell, because we've been talking about that whole Tyler is Vogue thing for a while, and I wasn't sure. But of course, with Cornwell saying it was that she recognized it as PTSD, I kind of threw the trigger away. But I guess it was pretty gruesome, especially the torture scenes, seeing a little bit of what was really happening, in those 7 months that he was in captivity by the Klingons, whether those are implanted memories, if he actually is Vogue or not. But I don't have any real world experience with PTSD, so I know one person that has it, but they don't talk about it much. So I didn't have any real world frame of reference in my personal life to compare it to, as Eric did.
Yeah. Sarah, did you have any comments?
Just their whole relationship is very confusing, especially the end when he's in the brig. And it seems like, maybe there's some Stockholm syndrome going on.
Yeah. So let's take a deeper look at all of this, because this is where kind of the meat is. So we have one situation where Tyler is seeing L'Rell and having this panic attack, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, and suffering, what Cornwell is saying in PTSD. Again, I appreciate the fact that Discovery is attempting to address this with Tyler, because it's come up before, so I know they're making an effort. But again, I think it's because of the confinement of this 15 episode story arc and only having episodes that are like 40 something minutes a piece. We're not really having a discussion about PTSD. It's not like It's Only a Paper Moon with Nog, there's no real discussion. You don't walk away, deep in thought or contemplating what was said. So there's not really a takeaway there. And I agree with Eric. Again, I don't have excuse me, I don't have PTSD. There, I have a lot of veterans in my family, but I don't have anyone super close to me that has PTSD. I guess specifically from like a torture or a war experience. I should clarify that because I do suffer some PTSD from relationship experience, but I definitely understand that disconnect with Cornwell's comments versus the reality of how most people with PTSD feel. And the one thing that kind of I didn't really like was just the fact that she was just using Burnham she's like, well, Burnham is counting on you or something, and that snapped him out of it. And I really don't like using that trope. It happened in Wonder Woman as well, which I sidetrack here, but I loved the Wonder Woman movie up until that point where it's, sorry, spoilers, guys. It's kind of like she reflects back on Steve Rogers, and then now she feels empowered and can save the day. I don't like that. I want to see the characters stand on their own, especially just the whole that it's a relationship that's pulling them back. Like it's a relationship that's bringing them out of whatever they're in to motivate them. So that's where I think it falls short. Now, what happened with Laurel is a different thing. So on one hand, we have the subject of torture, and let's talk a minute about these flashbacks where he's being tortured specifically, because we don't get any good view. It's very quick, and you could tell that there's definitely torture going on. And I think a lot of us are probably asking, well, is it specifically torture or is it some kind of body modification? If this whole Voke is Ash theory is real, are these perhaps flashbacks to that happening? Jeff, was that something you were thinking?
It crossed my mind. But I dismissed it because all of the scenes that we saw that looked like blades on skin and things, they all looked as if they were being done to a human body, not necessarily some sort of reconstructive surgery. So I dismissed that, although it is a compelling theory, but I just didn't think it fit necessarily with the images that we were seeing.
Eric, did you have any thoughts? What were you thinking during that scene or those scenes?
I'm more in the line that he is having a flashback to surgery. We can talk about the Voke Tyler connection all night long. I don't want to belabor that point, but I think that he is starting to remember what was done to him. And going back to a conversation you guys had last week, I think it's a Manchurian Candidate situation, and I think the episode was kind of hinting at that. And what really kind of struck me during my rewatch was when he went to the brig, he knelt before Laurel, which is something that Vok did, I believe, the first time he met her. And there's just little Easter eggs that episode kept dropping.
Yeah, and it definitely obviously he knows that she did something. It wasn't just you tortured me, right? Because we know that torture is torture, but he knows that something is wrong with him. So that's where and again, I also don't like rehashing the whole Ash's Voke and how is this all happening, because it's to the point where I just don't even understand how it could happen. I don't think that Tyler's body was actually changed. I don't think it was Voke's body changed into a human body. I guess that could still maybe happen somehow. I definitely lean more on the line of somehow Voke's memory, mentality, whatever is there sitting in Ash Tyler's brain somewhere waiting to be turned on. And as Laurel said, soon. That's kind of what I got from there. And I really hope that they get to it sooner than later, because honestly, I'm kind of tired of wondering what's going on. Like at this point, it's just, maybe I'm just being impatient, but I kind of would like to know more specifically what it is that's happening. Sarah, did you have any comments on the torture scene part?
It's just making me think more and more. I want to know who Laurel is. Because she seems like so many different people. She's playing so many different angles at once. I want to know who she is behind all of that.
Yeah. And, she's like Lorca, like you don't know, you don't know what's going on. So we have the torture scene, and I will be completely honest, like it's very difficult because I've grown to have affection for Laurel as a character. Even though she's maybe a bad character, I admire her a lot. And when I think about her performing those acts of torture on Ash, I get a little sick to my stomach. And after this episode, I'm having a lot of difficulty because of the other scene that we saw where Tyler is having the dream, or the dream flashback about his encounter with, or one of the sexual encounters with Laurel, which is essentially sexual assault. So Tyler has explained since we met him, what his relationship with Laurel was, and that she had taken a liking to him. And the way that it was implied assumed that there was some type of sexual relationship when we first met him, and then we never really heard about it until this episode. I'm going to commend, so Boe Young Kim and then Erica Lippold were the writers of this episode. I will commend the writing and the scene between Tyler and Burnham, where they're at least talking about what happened. Again, I think that scene could have done better because he's essentially saying that he made a choice to do what he did and encouraged it to survive. And the reality in those situations is that you never really have a choice when that's happening. That moment between the two of them and the discussion that they did have, that was enough for me. Anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I am a survivor of sexual assault as a child and as a teenager. And as a teenager, it was extended over a long period of time. So the scene between Tyler and Laurel, I think, was very confusing because he's explaining that, oh, he didn't have a choice and he encouraged it and he did what he did because he had to. And then the way that the scene was done was not shown from the perspective of an abuse victim. Okay. And I'm curious as to what you guys think, because I found the scene, regardless of the nudity in the scene, I didn't feel that it was portrayed as traumatic. I actually felt that it was eroticized. So I guess, Jeff, you agree with that? Did you want to comment?
I did feel it was eroticized, and I wasn't sure if it was I watched it twice, and I wasn't sure. Both times, I wasn't sure if it was a nightmare flashback, or like it wasn't clear to me. I mean, he woke up in a sweat, of course, but it seemed to me like it was less of a portrayal of a rape or an assault than it was of a sex scene.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, did you have any comments?
It was definitely disturbing. Mm-hmm. I can kind of see where he was having to perform in that situation. But yeah, I see where you're coming from, Heather.
Yeah. Eric, what about you?
I did think it was very disturbing. And I did watch it twice when I rewatched the episode just to see where they were coming from. And I really don't know. I was having a conversation with several other friends who watched the episodes as well, trying to get their input, because we knew that this would be a big thing for discussion. And I hope that it turns out to be a flashback to something from a better part of Volk's life, because I really don't want to think about if it was portraying abuse, because it was not done properly if it's portraying real abuse.
Yeah, and I hate to be like, oh, I guess we'll see. I don't want to see that again. I don't, and I have championed Discovery for these 9 episodes, and since the show was announced, I've had so much faith, and it's really difficult for me on one hand to have such, sorry for being emotional, for having such a standout moment for the queer community that was truly beautiful. And not just one moment. I mean, just all of the scenes with Stamets and Culber were just, they were really the highlight of this episode for me. But sexual assault is not erotic. It's not sexy. I really despise the fact that they included the nudity that they did. As many of my women friends have pointed out, I've been fortunate not to have seen the discussion that has happened, but they have. And that is that this scene is not being talked about as sexual assault, but as look at the Klingon boobs. So overall, I really wish that they had not included that scene. I don't think that it was in any way necessary to talking about Ash's PTSD. I mean, frankly, I don't really understand why we're even bringing up the sexual relationship between the two of them. And it's going to take a lot at this point to convince me that that's needed in Discovery at all. And please understand that this isn't just a blatant criticism. Like, because of what's happened to me in my life, I know what that's like. And having to watch that in Star Trek was really difficult. And I don't ever want to dread talking about an episode of Star Trek the way that I did today. So I really hope that we don't revisit this, and that I don't really even know what to expect in the future to bring a resolution to what's happened or to better explain what happened. I just really don't want to see it again. And I wanted to talk about it because I just really have to emphasize that what we saw was not an accurate depiction of what sexual assault is. Okay. Go ahead.
I don't know if this helps, but to me it read as a traumatic flashback because they made it look like something, like the first thing I thought of when I saw it was the Alien movies. Like having one of those awful creatures on top of you. Like I very much saw it as a traumatic memory, not an erotic one.
I'm glad, and I hope that other people didn't, and I don't know if it's just my own experience changes my perception in a way that people who have not had these experiences just won't understand or won't see it that way. I really hope that people saw it as something really bad, like you said. I appreciate that. And again, I don't really feel like it was necessary.
No, I agree with you. I don't necessarily I don't think it was necessary either. I think they could have left it with the previous, torture sequence that we saw, and if they had to make reference to it, it could have just been a verbal reference in the discussion between Burnham and Tyler.
Yeah.
That could have been that.
It's a difficult thing to see something like that, and even like the PTSD and the torture pop up, and then we don't have discussions about it. Like, yeah, I know that Tyler talked to Burnham and told Burnham about the relationship and why he did what he did, but there's just not enough there for me to really justify bringing something like sexual assault up. And again, with the PTSD, I haven't experienced it via war in the way that Ash Tyler did, so I don't want to speak up for veterans since I'm not one. But I think that Discovery can do better, and I really hope that they do, because it was really difficult with this episode where I love Discovery. I have claimed it as my Discovery, and then to see something like that without any kind of warning. And I'm not saying that Discovery needs to put trigger warnings on everything, but it was just really difficult. Let's move on to something not so heavy that makes me cry. Okay. So aside from that, I guess Eric, did you have any other standout moments that were maybe positive?
So positive moments that I thought of was I am very happy that they did not decide to do a kind of Errand of Mercy redux, because at the end of last episode I was kind of expecting that. That the Pavins turn out to be super ultra powerful and just put an end to the war, Treaty of Organia like. And I'm very happy that they took a different route. And I thought that did show some creative writing there. And also the death of Cole, to bring it up again, that was a very powerful scene. And I don't know if anyone else had a flashback to kind of the homage to the end of Star Trek Six and the death of Chang, but the kind of slow motion torpedo strike on the cloaked ship, and then kind of Lorca putting in the eye drops.
Yes.
Watch the explosion. I thought that was a very powerful scene.
Yeah, I loved that. And I loved that how they had the light from the explosion on his face. Like that was such a, I don't know, it was an epic Lorca moment, I'll call it.
Well, and just all the exchanged looks all around the bridge between all the different characters.
Yeah. Sarah, did you have any more positive things? I'm trying to pull the positivity out of us.
Well, I don't know if you want to talk about the title at all. I had to look it up because I'm like, what is this from? Into the forest I go.
Mhm.
And the rest of the quote is to lose my mind and find my soul.
Yep. Where does it come from? Do you know?
John Muir, he was an American Scottish naturalist and philosopher.
Very cool.
So I suppose he liked going.
I found it randomly. No, I found it randomly on Pinterest. Like I wasn't even looking for quotes, and that thing that popped up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then Stamets he doesn't say that line specifically, but when he comes out of the spore chamber and he's going all Gary Mitchell eyes on us.
So I think it was a clearing in the forest.
That's how they go. And I wondered if I don't know what that was in reference to. I thought it was like, oh, it's something on the planet with the Pavins, but I'm not quite sure. Anybody? I guess nobody else knows what it may be.
I think we will find out. I think it has something to do with the place they ended up at the end of the show. I'm not willing to call it the Mirror Universe yet, but I'm pretty sure it's the Mirror Universe.
Yeah, it seems like that's going to be the case.
Was that Klingon wreckage? Because I don't know what Klingon wreckage looks like.
That's what they said.
Oh, is it? I thought maybe it was Starfleet wreckage, but
no, they said that looks like Klingon wreckage.
He says, "Is that Klingon wreckage?" So I was.
Oh, does he say "is that" and they don't respond to it?
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll find out. Go ahead, Eric.
I actually watched that scene in slow motion, trying to see if I could see anything on the hull, and I'm just cycling through it, and it might be that's the Klingon Cardassian alliance from DS9. That's the good guys against the Terran Empire.
Yeah, we had the spoiler way back when Jonathan Frakes said that they had filmed a mirror episode. Or a Mirror Universe episode, and episode 10 is the one that's directed by Jonathan Frakes. Mm-hmm. So, whether or not it's literally the Mirror Universe, I mean, there are multiple Mirror Universes, really, but I guess we'll have to wait a couple months to find out. Jeff, do you have any positive standout moments?
Well, one of the moments that made me chuckle a little bit was, I think it was the last episode of DiscoTrek that we did. We were not talking about the Tyler's Vogue thing again, but we were surmising how L'Rell was going to get onto the Discovery, right? She's going to have to get on there at some point. If Tyler's Vogue, she's going to need to trigger him some way. And I didn't see it coming. She used the old jump on you while you're transporting gag. I'm glad to know that still works. It wasn't just a crazy anomaly from Star Trek 4, but I love that works. Scientifically, I have no idea how that could possibly work. I guess the computers can recalibrate mid-beam and separate you apart again, but I don't know. I thought that was just amused me that's the mechanic they used to get her on board Discovery.
Yeah, and I was curious, like, once they beamed on, they just, I guess, were like, and then took her prisoner because there was really no explanation, like, no moment there of what happened.
I mean, if I were Tyler, I would have had like a second, third, and fourth breakdown right there.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else you can think of, Jeff?
Well, it's another one of those broader questions, building on the whole Cole is dead thing. Knowing that Cole was essentially the new leader of the unified Klingon Empire, what does this mean for the Klingon Empire that their emperor is now dead? This is the guy that was doling out the cloaking technology to all the other houses, and they were all aligning behind him. Now he's dead. So are we going to have a Klingon Empire in disarray? Are we going to have another person step up, another Klingon step up into his shoes? How is this going to work? It's again new ground for the Klingon Empire.
Yeah, somewhere else in the universe today, someone mentioned, oh, they thought the war was over. Like, this means the war is over as far as I'm concerned. And I'm like, no. We still have half a season, and the season is still about the Klingon War. So I'm not sure. Obviously, L'Rell's going to play a certain part, and I guess we'll see whether we see a Klingon Voke again or not. But yeah, lots of questions, still lots of loose threads. Like, whatever happened to those black badges, right? Yeah. Like, we had our whole Section 31 stuff back in the first few episodes, and then that really hasn't popped up again. There are a lot of people moving away from the Tyler is Voke theory. A lot of people still expecting it to happen, but not knowing. Hopefully we'll see Sarek again. Certainly lots of stuff.
What are we gonna get from him? Is he gonna show back?
I hope. A lot of people thought that was the last we would see of Harry Mudd.
I certainly.
Someone was saying he's on IMDb for like 3 more episodes.
Oh,
so. That's good, but I really don't trust IMDb because they have not been accurate with who they've listed in what episodes.
Gotcha.
True.
Like, Georgiou was listed in 15 episodes and she was in 2. Well, and then she was a hologram in another. I'm hoping that we may see like a mirror alive version of Georgiou in the next half of the season. One of the things that I really enjoy when I watch Discovery with closed captioning is it picks up little things like the shout out to Cadet Decker. Please report to the ready room. That was just over the PA. And I am not going to get into, well, how old would Decker have been? Blah, 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 blah. I don't care. It was a fun little shout out. That's all I'm taking from it. The Tribble is not on Lorca's desk again. Did notice that. Everybody's keeping track of what happens with that Tribble and where it goes. So it has disappeared, and perhaps we will find out what happens in the next half of the season. All right. Any final thoughts that anybody wanted to say about this episode? Eric, what about you?
So one thing that I was thinking of was sometimes Discovery is a great show, but sometimes it just takes itself a little too seriously. And sometimes I miss the classic campy Star Trek moments, and especially when in Star Trek Beyond, when they threw in the Beastie Boys at that key scene. If there was ever a time to play House of Pain's Jump Around in Star Trek, it was during that last battle. You got Tilly pumping canisters into the spore drive. You got a mech-left fight going on. You got Discovery going everywhere. I'm like, that song would be perfect in this scene.
I can only imagine the pushback we would have heard.
I would like to see Eric's Discovery Dream mixtape.
Yes, that is a challenge. We will play it at STLV during our tricorder transmissions party, I'm sure. What about you, Sarah? Any final thoughts?
That was really quite the place to leave off the episode. It's going to be a long 2 months until January.
Well,
like you said, we're just going to rewatch, right?
Exactly. And I'm a little glad because it's my busy season for my business and I'll be working a lot. But in my downtime, I do plan to go through and watch all 9 episodes at least once, probably twice. I really want to pick out the standout moments from each episode. And I want to look at just like how my perception has changed throughout these 9 episodes. Like I said, like I was very much Team Burnham, and I still adore Michael Burnham. Right, I think she's amazing. I'm glad that she's our lead female character, but I find myself drawn to Stamets more and more. And again, I just feel like he's just there's something extra, something extra there that I love, and so I'm curious just to see if I can pinpoint where that's changed or whatnot. But I don't know. I can think of nothing better to do over the break than to binge watch because that's what it's made for. At the end of the day, it's one long story, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to sit down and take this journey again. Jeff, did you have any final thoughts?
Well, building on what you were just saying about, being having more of an affinity for Stamets or a growing affinity for Stamets, I found it really fascinating that this show really is supposed to focus a lot on Burnham's character, but she's not really a part of the focus of the actual cliffhanger, right? There's, Stamets' status is up in the air and the whereabouts of the ship are up in the air, but that's kind of why I was thinking she was going to wind up getting captured by the Klingon ship to have her character in jeopardy. But I thought it was fascinating that they went a different route with it, and Stamets's condition really got the spotlight, especially in that little teaser bit that we saw that we usually don't talk about. But overall, yeah, I love the fact that I didn't see that cliffhanger coming. I'm glad that they changed it up on me, and I haven't learned my lesson yet with Discovery, and I keep thinking I know what's going to happen, and it's thrown me for a loop every single time. So I guess by the time the next half of the season rolls around, hopefully I'll have learned that lesson through my rewatch leading up to the premiere. Strong episodes, especially a strong last few episodes of the season. I'm a fully converted person now. I guess everybody who's been listening to DiscoTrek since the beginning knew I was kind of on the fence about the series at first, but I've really grown to love it, and I'm fully in the pool now. So
not just your toe, just toe in.
It was toe in, then it was ankle deep, then it was like the third step up to the knee, and then I was like, all right, 4th episode, I'm diving all the way in. So it took a little while to get there, but I'm there now.
I'm glad to hear it. Right now I'm standing by my declaration that Discovery is my Star Trek, despite my difficulty with this episode. At the end of the day, and pardon the repetition, I think I've said it every episode now, but Star Trek has always been a pretty great example of who we're going to be someday. And one of the things we love most about Star Trek is that sense of hope and optimism. And I won't say that every character in Star Trek has been perfect. I don't think that the TOS crew is all perfect characters. I think that TNG and beyond were closer to that and more of the aspirational characters that we see ourselves as being someday. But Discovery's characters are very raw and human, and that's who I am. And I see myself in a lot of them, and I see my friends in them. And before I forget, random shout out to Tilly's little pigtail buns, which were adorable. Sorry, I just had to because they're so cute. I wish Tilly had more of a part in this episode than she did, because she had a pretty crucial part and didn't get a lot of lines for this episode. So I want more Tilly. I want Captain Tilly, and maybe we'll see Captain Tilly in episode 10. But I will say that I love Discovery. I have some qualms, like I've talked about, like with just not kind of being confined to this 15 episode uh, season. I wish it could be more. I wish we got a bit more depth, and we'll talk about that later on. But overall, these 9 episodes exceeded my expectations. I just wanted to have good Star Trek on TV. And for me, this is good Star Trek. So I look forward to January 7th. I guess January 8th is when we'll be back on to talk about all of this. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to pull up comments from our unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas group. Oh, I messed that up. Unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook. We're glad to have welcomed some new members who've been listening to the podcast. So I hope that we get to talk to you sometime in the future. But in the meantime, we make these posts so that everyone can comment. So I just wanted to read a few of them. And Jeff, you're welcome to chime in if you want. We've got Kat Merrill saying, I'm sad that it's going to be over for now. I'll have to binge all the episodes in the coming weeks. So I think the few of us will be on board with that. Let's see. Our good friend Marina Kravchuk, that was a great mid-season finale. Heavy stuff. I think we can all agree on the heavy stuff aspect. Jeff, are there any that are popping out for you?
Well, I think Marty's comment about the episode bringing him to tears, the Stamets-Culber moments were touching, as they were heartbreaking. As we all talked about, stunning work by everyone who works on the show, and Jesse Akendo co-signed. He teared up too. So I guess that moment really is resonating with people out there. I'm glad to hear that it is, because it was a wonderful addition to this episode, especially amidst all the action that was going on. It was nice to have those emotional breaks in there. Let's see. Yezeni, our good friend Yezeni, says, holy hell, that was some crazy. I want to watch it again to get my thoughts together, but I'm so sad we have to wait nearly 2 months for more episodes. But you know what? 2 months in the grand scheme of things is really not that bad of a wait in today's day and age between mid-season and final, because some of the other big popular shows, you have to wait a heck of a lot longer than that.
Like Game of Thrones, you're going to have to wait 1.5 years.
Hey, maybe they'll give us a second Star Trek series to fill in the between season break.
Well, I mentioned that in our last episode, because way back when there had been some comments about Nicholas Meyer potentially working on some type of spin-off, and we've yet to see anything further about that. But, we had the discussion last week about some of the things CBS could do to keep us around. And I'm really hoping, I won't be canceling my membership over these 2 months. Whether I actually watch anything on CBS All Access is to be seen. But I'll hang on until the season is over. But if Star Trek isn't going to be back on for another year and a half or whatever, then I'll probably cancel it until then and hope that they make some improvements to the app.
Yeah, really.
But all right, so I guess that brings us to the end of the show. So now's the time where we tell everyone how to find us online. So Eric, where can people find you if they want to talk Star Trek?
Well, I am one of the admins of the USS Pershing Officers Club on Facebook, and we always welcome discussions about Discovery and all things Trek. It is the official Facebook page of Star Trek New Horizons, which is our original fan-written series with a new ship and a new crew set in the aftermath of the Dominion War. So if you want to know what's going on in the Alpha and Beta quadrants between the end of DS9 and Voyager's return, check us out.
Awesome. And Sarah, what about you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and you can definitely find me in the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group.
Woohoo! I see you all the time there. Jeff, where can we find you?
I am on Twitter at Warp Factor Jeff, and of course, I'm also part of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook.
All right, and so you can find me on Twitter. I am at LLA Posper. The show is Disco_Trek. The network is Tricorder Show, and then our website is thetricordertransmissions.com. And like I said, you got to be a member of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group to get access to the show. So please come and join us. You don't have to come to the convention, but we hope that you will so that we can meet all of our listeners. It's been great. And we will actually be back for one more supplemental episode, as I mentioned. That'll probably drop in the next couple of weeks. So thanks, guys, so much for being here. We appreciate having you and you making time for us. And we hope to talk to you again on the interwebs. All right. Thanks, everybody.